In the past, most of the differences between central vacuum units and different brands were design differences. You had the bagged units like Filtex, you had the bagless ones like VacuFlow, um, the ones with a cloth filter like Beam, but in general they were all pretty good quality products, pretty long-lasting products, and like so many other things, they've gotten cheaper over time. And from about 2005 up until 2015, I believe, if you bought a house and it had a central vac in it and it was put in by somebody other than a central vac company, you had a good chance of getting one of these things. And if you've got one of these, whether it's red or it's blue, please allow me to offer my deepest sympathies, because this is a horrible abomination of a machine. Now, they did some things right in the design of this. They did give you dual intakes. You could bring the pipe in on the right or on the left. They did give you a utility inlet to plug the hose into the machine itself, which is good. And they gave you a manual off-on switch there. There were several different models. The red series was supposed to be bagless, and it had 4 models. The blue series was supposed to be bagged, and it had the same 4 models. One for 3,000 square feet, one for 7,500 square feet, which is what this one is. Airvac AVP 7500, made in 2007. One for 12,000 square feet, and one, the model is 24,000, but I can't imagine that they were that delusional. The only difference was that was 240 volts. But still, all the machines used one little 5.7-inch 2-stage motor. And that's nowhere near appropriately sized for a house, 7,500 or 12,000 square feet, and certainly isn't going to last. Even in a 3,000 square foot house, these things seem to be burning out at 10 years or less. And sometimes it's the motor, sometimes it's the circuit board. This board, instead of the kind where you crimp quick connectors onto the low voltage wires and shove them onto the little flag terminals, with this you depress these little buttons, you stick the wire in and you release. And these had a bad habit of breaking and not holding the wires, and then the only fix is to take the stupid thing all apart and replace the board. You can get a board for these, you can get a motor for them, but I do not recommend making any sort of repairs to these units, and here's why. The housing of the motor relies on a seal to the motor plate created by these screws. There's 9 of these screws around the perimeter, and they all have to be screwed tightly in. Otherwise, you'll get a vacuum leak between here and the plastic of the motor plate, and the thing will have half the suction it's supposed to. That's the problem with this. That's the reason I had to rip it out and put in a new one. There's no real good fix for that, because when the threaded inserts break out of the plastic housing, you won't be able to get these to screw in. They really should have caused, they should have designed the thing so that the motor plate sealed to the filtration chamber, and the motor housing, this plastic part, was just a housing, not a functional part of the system. But somebody wasn't thinking, somebody didn't care. The other goofy thing about these machines is how little dust it takes to block this secondary filter off. If you have about a tablespoon of dust on this filter that worked its way through the inverted cloth filter down here, the thing will have half the airflow it's supposed to, and you can't figure out why, unless you watch this video, of course. When the bag is full, this timer is supposed to tell you that the thing needs to be changed, but it is actually only a timer, which means it has no idea how full it is. It just says, okay, every 10 hours I'm going to turn red. And in my opinion, if you're out here staring at the idiot lights, you may as well just look and see how full it actually is. Simple's better. Simple's longer lasting. The latches, flimsy, cheap. They can be bent out of shape. Fortunately, they can be back bent into shape, but it is possible to latch the bucket on without the groove in the bucket engaging the rim on the machine. So if you change the bag and you put it back together and you notice that the thing has half the suction it did before, check that this bucket is latched on properly. Also the bags. As I mentioned, this is a disposable bag machine. And here is one of the bags. This is called a slide gate collar bag. And this brown piece of paper is connected to this flap, so when you pull this over, then it seals the opening off. Big, huge opening. Not really a terribly large bag. The reason this opening is so big is because it has to contact the bottom of this funnel when you put the bucket back on. And so the dirt comes in the intake and comes down and goes into the bag and then is trapped by the filter. And if you know anything about the way a disposable bag is supposed to work, the bag is supposed to be your filter. And one of the big benefits is when you change the bag, you have a fresh filter. In this case, the bag is serving only as a liner for the dirt container. It wouldn't even have to be paper, it could be plastic. And just a mess. Very messy machine to empty. So the money you spend on these bags, because they're not cheap nor are they easy to find, is a waste. Your filtering is all being done by this cloth filter in here. And that dust dropping down is going to be all over your basement floor or your garage floor. So if you got one of these things in your house and you never cared for it, please know there are much better options available today. Thank goodness they don't make these anymore. And as I said, even though I can repair them, I really recommend not to. Instead, please look into putting in a quality made in the USA central vacuum like an MD manufacturing machine. I've got a few examples of those over here from the 80s and 90s. Today the design is largely unchanged. Why mess with a working system? And these machines still provide phenomenal track records of performance and longevity. So you don't have to be stuck with junk in your house.